The Bacchae is an ancient Greek tragedy written by the Athenian playwright Euripides during his final years in Macedonia. It was first performed at the theatre of Dionysus in 405 BC, and while it was written by Euripides, it was directed by his son of the same name. It even won first prize in the City Dionysia Festival competition. Now, while we barely know anything about Euripides Jr., we know quite a lot about his father. Euripides Sr. was a busy man, writing around 90 plays, which about 18 survive to this very day. Plays like Medea and the Trojan Women, and for our purposes today, the Bacchae.
So before we start, I gotta say, I've never read the Bacchae, despite being a practicing pagan for Dionysus. Now, one thing led to another and I ended up getting the book. And I gotta say, this book's pretty wild. So it's all about Dionysus and his cousin Pentheus, and Pentheus is using his king status in order to outlaw Dionysus' worship. And his aunts are talking a whole bunch of shit about him and his mother. So Dionysus comes to bring the boot down on them, and yeah, that's about it. But before we get into this, we gotta know a little more about our leading man, Dionysus.
Dionysus, to many people, is the god of wine and parties. But it doesn't end there. He's also the god of rebirth, madness, and intoxication in a lot of forms. So Dionysus was conceived in the city of Thebes by the mortal woman Semele. She slept with Zeus, and as we see in a lot of myths, Zeus had another kid. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows for Dionysus. Hera, Zeus's wife, she finds out about Semele, and after donning a disguise, she goes to talk to Semele. So Semele makes Zeus promise her a favor on the river Styx, and once he agreed, she asks him to reveal his true form. So he does, and that means, oh no, she's dead. But Zeus finds the fetus in the ashes, and instead of letting him die, he cracks open his thigh and lets him finish cooking in there. So Dionysus is what's referred to as a Theo. Theo is a term for something that isn't a full god, but also is not really mortal. You could argue that Dionysus is a demigod, but he could be more god than human due to him being in Zeus's thigh for a while he was growing, you know? But I'm not going to go into that today. After birth, our guy may have been ripped apart by titans and reborn, but sources vary on that. Anyways, he may have been raised by a few different people, but again, sources vary. His adopted parents could be anyone from his aunt and uncle Athamas and Ino, who raised him as a girl, or Rhea, the mother of Zeus, or even the minor god known as Silenus, who is listed as the mentor of Dionysus. Sources vary, but I'll try to explain more later. For now, let's get into the meat of this video. The prologue starts with the booming voice of Dionysus, explaining his travels. At this point he'd been to the east, places like Lydia, Persia, Arabia. Name a place in the east, he'd probably been there. And according to him, he brought them wealth, blessings, and all sorts of things. Now he's here with an army of Maenads. He is here at Thebes. He explains that while his grandfather Cadmus is still being respectful to him, his cousin Pentheus has outlawed his worship, and how his aunts had been bad-mouthing his mother, saying that she lied about being with Zeus, how Zeus killed her for lying, and how Dionysus is probably dead. But spoiler, he's not dead. Now once Dionysus has finished his speech, his Maenads that he got from the east enter so they can sing about him. They start singing about Bromius, and I know you are wondering who Bromius is. I'll get to that in a second. They start recounting Dionysus' birth, as I said earlier. They sing about how everyone will join them once they start partying in the city. And they also sing about not safe for YouTube stuff that I really won't go into.
So let's talk about epithets. Epithets are basically how a god is being worshipped in any specific place, seeing as there was a very long time that Greece went on for, and it's a very big country, so no one had a concluded version of any god. Like Dionysus Manolis, he was a figure of anger and rage, and Dionysus Oxus is a figure of who is considered the giver of incense. Now Dionysus Bromius, he's a version of Dionysus that's very loud and booming. But look, I have to make something clear. We're not talking about different gods, we're talking about one god worshipped in different ways. Now I know I keep bringing up the Maenads. What are the Maenads? There are these crazed followers of Dionysus. Now, Dionysus had a lot of followers. He even had an inner circle of followers. But the Maenads were totally the most intense of the group. They would rip apart anything that came close to them. And Maenads always wore fawn skin and carried thyrsus. I have a thyrsus. As you can see, there is a stick with a pine cone on it. It's a major symbol of Dionysus and his followers.
So Act 1 starts with Tiresias. He's this old blind prophet and he's yelling for Cadmus. Once Cadmus comes down, you can see he's even older than Tiresias. And they're both wearing Dionysian ritual clothing. So they talk for a bit about how they're going to head the wine church in the wild, and about how nobody but them actually worships Dionysus here. So after a bit of talking, they spy on our antagonist, King Pentheus. So Pentheus is pissed. All the women have left town to worship Dionysus, and he wasn't having any of it. And even at one point he says they just worship Aphrodite. And so Pentheus decides to hunt them down and stop their gallivanting. Assuming Dionysus is just some pretty boy charmer instead of an actual god, he wants to take him down really badly, saying that once he's imprisoned him, all the women will stop their rituals and return. He even starts talking badly about Semele, saying that she was lying and everything, until he spots his grandpa Cadmus and Tiresias spying on him. So he starts ordering Cadmus to take off the Dionysian clothing, and even blames Tiresias for brainwashing him. The chorus starts to reprimand him, but they can't really hear the chorus, so Tiresias lays into him, telling Pentheus how Demeter and Dionysus are actually comparable gods, seeing as they're both agricultural gods. He tells him how force isn't power and how thought isn't wisdom, and basically how they aren't going to follow any of his orders if they're against Dionysus. Pentheus is even more upset now. He orders his guard to go find Dionysus so he can be stoned. The act ends with the haunting singing of the ladies in the chorus.
So Pentheus here, he's very stubborn. He doesn't want to open his mind, and he's going as far as bad-mouthing Semele. And when you badmouth the mother of a god, it never turns out good, especially a god like Dionysus. So if you didn't know before, Pentheus doesn't believe in Dionysus' divinity. He thinks that the ladies are just following Aphrodite, which is just a tongue-in-cheek way of saying they're thinking with lust instead of their actual thoughts. So Tiresias is completely right to compare Dionysus and Demeter. They're both agricultural gods. They both have a hand in the harvest, and they are very good with creating things for people to enjoy, such as Demeter making wheat that becomes bread, Dionysus creating grapes that become wine. It's very similar.
The act opens with a group of soldiers coming to Pentheus. They tell him that they caught Dionysus, actually very easy. He actually waited for them and gave himself over without even a fight. So Pentheus orders them to bring him closer. He wants to look our guy over. Pentheus starts actually mocking Dionysus for his feminine features and asks about his name and his family information, and Dionysus recounts Zeus and his rituals. Pentheus wants to know about these rituals, but no luck. He's not initiated. The wine god straight up refuses to give him that information. So they have a back and forth for a little bit, where Dionysus won't answer any of his questions, so Pentheus calls for punishment. Ooh woo. Once Pentheus is done talking, our guy asks about how he'll be punished. Ooh woo. So Pentheus orders his hair to be cut, which Dionysus is like, hey, that's holy hair, man. Pentheus orders for his thyrsus to be taken from him, and Dionysus says, you're gonna have to take it by force, buddy. Lastly, Dionysus is ordered to be imprisoned, in which he responds, you know I can leave anytime I want, right? Pentheus gets all pissy and orders for him to be tied up. And he warns him. Oh, does he warn him? He basically says he shouldn't be tied up because he's the only one among them who isn't completely insane. Pentheus claims to be more powerful and have the right to chain him up. Dionysus shuts that down pretty fast. He says that Pentheus not only has no idea what he's doing here, but what he's doing and even who he is. And the king mocks this wisdom. Bad idea, man. Pentheus has him locked away in the stables, and goes even further to claim he'll enslave his followers, the Maenads. So Dionysus gives him one final warning, saying, hey, I'm not going to suffer what won't happen. As he's taken to be imprisoned, without his thyrsus, his hair short, the act ends with the singing of the chorus. So, editor's note, I forgot to put an analysis in, but I have what I wrote. It's that you gotta feel kind of bad for Pentheus. He's struggling against something vastly more powerful than he is, and he's trying to cling to any false hope of power that he even has. But Dionysus is a god, so he's not going to let him have that. And it's just kind of sad for him to try to keep overpowering him. And his rituals are normally all closed to everyone who is outside of it, and Dionysus isn't going to let somebody with a hard heart like his inside of his group. So there's that. So Act 3 starts with a bang. Lightning, thunder, earthquakes, the palace is literally breaking apart as Dionysus shouts inside of it. His maenads can hear him and start asking him to join them, but he's locked up. Every time he calls out for an earthquake, the world rumbles. Every time he calls out for lightning, it strikes the ground around him. Lightning strikes Semelle's tomb, and the ladies, expectantly, they freak out. But they're not like scared freaking out, they're more like fangirl freaking out. So the lightning comes down on the castle, shocking, burning the ever-living hell out of everything around it. So Dionysus wasn't lying before. He actually gets free extremely easily. He just walks out of the castle, smiling, super confident, perfectly fine. His maenads are ecstatic to see him, but after some back and forth he reveals that he actually gave Pentheus visions. So while Pentheus was messing with him, trying to bind him, trying to kill him, he wasn't really doing anything to him, and Dionysus just sat and watched. Then he hears footsteps approaching. Pentheus is coming for his maenads. But Pentheus is actually surprised to see our guy, and Dionysus tells him the truth. He set himself free. Pentheus wants to put up a wall around the city, but our guy is like, you know I can jump over that, right? I'm a god. A messenger comes to Pentheus. He tells Pentheus of the maenads and mentions that he actually hesitated to come tell Pentheus because he has a notorious temper. Pentheus tells him, though, that only Dionysus will be taking the blame here. So he continues. The messenger tells Pentheus he saw Autono, Ino, and Agave, the mother of Pentheus, and how they began to join the Dionysian worship. They were nursing animals, their thyrsus dripped with honey, and everywhere they tapped the thyrsus, milk and honey seeped from the ground below. Then things got crazy. He tried to stop the maenads, but they made the area around him as red as the Golden Gate Bridge. Armed only with pine cones on sticks, they ripped through every soldier, guard, and warrior who came up against them, and they destroyed the crops. Nothing else was safe either. The messenger begs Pentheus, he begs him to accept Dionysus, saying that no joy will ever come without him. So Pentheus, poor Pentheus, decides, hey, how about I go to war with a god? I'll mock the god who's right in front of me, and I'll tell him how I'll kill all of his followers. Great idea! Except no, because that's a horrendous idea. As Pentheus starts to leave, Dionysus calls out to him and tells him that he can fix this peacefully. He can bring the maenads to him without even raising a weapon. Pentheus doesn't care though. This guy's been messing with him non-stop. Dionysus starts warping the king's mind. He convinces Pentheus that he should wear a dress and a wig, because if any of the maenads see him as a man, he's as good as dead. So Pentheus is reluctant, but he goes inside his castle to think about his next actions. While Pentheus does this, Dionysus calls out to his maenads, letting him know how he plans to strike him down in humiliation. Dionysus takes his leave into the castle, and the chorus rejoices in his name. After a bit of singing, our guy re-enters the stage. He's leading Pentheus, who is now dressed as a woman. Now Pentheus is really losing it. He sees Dionysus as having bull horns, and Dionysus, the kind guy he is, helps Pentheus fix his dress and his wig before they set off. Dionysus gives Pentheus some pointers, but the king's too crazed at this point to listen to anything. Dionysus praises him because he is now taking on the Dionysian garb and the behavior, but Pentheus talks about his plan to ambush the maenads. And Dionysus tells him how not only will he be brought home by his mother, he'll be carried home by his mother. The chorus sings as they head up, and as they arrive, the maenads descend upon the now king. Hard cut to a messenger entering the castle. He's here to break the news to Cadmus. Pentheus is dead. The chorus is ecstatic, absolutely elated, and they ask how he died. Turns out Pentheus got on top of a tree to get a better look, but the maenads got a better look of him too. They could see him from up there, so they circled around the tree, and they all worked together until they could rip the tree out of the ground. Obviously, Pentheus falls to the ground, pleading for mercy, and his mother comes up to him and rips his arm off. and then his aunt rips his other arm off, and the Maenads tore him to shreds. So Pentheus' mother took his head on a stick, and the messenger says he wants to flee because he doesn't want to be here when Agave gets here. And the Maenads arrive and sing as the messenger flees out of there as fast as he can. And Agave enters with the former king's head. She says it's the head of a lion, and that her and her sisters had the honor of killing it. Agave wants to gather people so they can see the head of this lion that she talks about. How proud she is of herself, and how proud Pentheus will be of her. She even holds the head up high with pride for the city to see. She goes inside to look for her dad and her son and a place to hang the head. Meanwhile, here comes Cadmus with some attendants, and they have the torn up body of Pentheus. She offers him the head, but he doesn't want it. He's not crazed like they are, he's completely grief-stricken. He's lost his children's minds and his grandson's life. And so Cadmus tells her to look at the sky. And then he asks about Pentheus and has her study the head she's holding, until she realizes whose head it actually is. She's confused and she's grieving as well, and Cadmus tells her how she killed her son and her sisters helped her. Cadmus doesn't really blame Dionysus, he more blames his daughters. They really upset the god, and they disrespected him like crazy, and they needed to be struck down. Eventually, Cadmus returns, and Cadmus asks for forgiveness, but Dionysus won't have any of it. He casts the two out of Thebes, and they are gone with the singing of the chorus. Only the body of Pentheus remains on stage.
Wow, now that was a big act. Obviously, we're going to talk about a few things here, like Dionysus invoking earthquakes. He's obviously invoking the name of his uncle Poseidon, and Dionysus invoking lightning and thunder. Easier one, that's Zeus, his own father. Now, Semele, basically her tomb getting struck, I know why that excites the Maenads. It's a recreation of how Dionysus was born. Like when Zeus revealed his true form to Semele and she was vaporized, not unlike him striking her tomb with lightning. Now moving to the milk and honey thing, Dionysus is very good with liquids and stuff. It's supposed to represent the cultivation of liquids, so milk, honey, and wine would all not exist if it were not for people and coming together with nature, with cows, with bees, with grapes, and they would just have nothing if it wasn't for humans creating it. So it's a combination between civilization and nature when he does that. Now while Dionysus is warping his mind, his heart still stays the same. His heart's all stiff and hardened. He doesn't want to open up to what could be a good idea. So he's just still in his own mind even when he's going crazy by the hands of Dionysus. And yeah, he mocked Dionysus for being feminine, but who's dressed up as a woman now? It seems kind of karmic that Dionysus would have him be killed while dressed as a woman, seeing as Pentheus berated him so much beforehand. And everything Dionysus said seemed to come to pass. His mother did carry him home. It was just his head, though. But that still came to pass. Now, Dionysus is a strange god. He's strange and very powerful. He has this duality about him, where he can be wild and charming. He can also be civilized and angry. He's very unique when it comes to gods. He's very dual-natured. If there's one thing I will take away from this story, it's that being forceful does not make you powerful. As Dionysus says in the Bacchae, people are not molded by force.
Thank you for watching. I mainly made this for my guy Dionysus, and if he needs me to make anything more, I will, but otherwise, have a nice day. This was a really fun experience.